Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the cards spoiled so far for Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth, one of the newest sets to enter the Magic the Gathering universe. And we're going to be talking about what cards are going to be seeing play in competitive EDH. Now, the full set has not been revealed yet. A lot of the set has been revealed at this point, but definitely a lot of cards still yet to come. So super excited to talk about these cards. Big Lord of the Rings fan, grew up listening to the books, watching the movies, all of that stuff. So excited to talk about this content and excited to show you some stuff from the set. Think about what's going to be played in competitive EDH moving forward. If you like videos like this, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And while you're at it, check out patreon.com/comedianmtg. I know there's been a lot of changes up there lately, but I'm going to be making a post in the next couple days, and or I've already made this post when you're actually seeing this video, basically explaining what's happening with the next couple months. As I mentioned, moving into June, I have a lot of really exciting stuff coming up. I'm going to be moving this week and basically moving in completely about halfway through June. So after that point, I'm going to be able to focus on content a lot more. I'm taking the summer to basically being able to double down into focusing on this channel, hoping to push out several videos a week, hoping to push out shorts, stuff like that. And I'm going to be also doubling the amount of tiers that have previously been available as far as cEDH coaching. So hopefully by about halfway through June, I'll be able to post that tier with all of the available slots. And as well, just reminding everybody, I do cEDH coaching independently of the Patreon as well. So if you're interested in coaching for cEDH, hit me up on Twitter or in my email at comedianmtg@gmail.com or my Discord, all of which are available in the show notes down below. Without any further ado, let's break down some of these set spoilers. As I mentioned with all of my set reviews, and even though it's a partial set review, anything like this, I have, just my opinions, my understanding of the format, and my understanding of cEDH as it's competitively shown. But, I'm not the extensive, I don't know all and all, I'm not the last opinion and only opinion out there, and I'd love to hear your opinions down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what people think about these new cards, and especially if there's any cards or any synergies that I miss, because it is definitely going to happen when there's, hundreds of cards being pushed out at all times, and there's definitely way cool stuff being printed. And I'd love to hear people's comments about the stuff that's been spoiled so far, and if anyone has any thoughts about some interesting cEDH applications. Without any further ado, jump into my first one here, Gandalf the White. So it's a flash 4/5 for 3 and 2 white. You may cast legendary spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. If a legendary permanent or an artifact entering or leaving the battlefield causes an ability, triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, the ability triggers an additional time. So Gandalf is really interesting because it's sort of like the Urza's Battlethopter, right? When it's giving all your artifacts flash. This also gives your legendary spells flash, which first you're adding a color to that spell, or to that card. You're then also adding a Panharmonicon ability for any of your artifacts or legendary permanents, and a doubling leaves the battlefield ability for all of your artifacts and permanents, on top of giving everything flash. So I think Gandalf is going to be very interesting. I think there's a lot of potential here as far as just what happens when you double up, like death triggers on artifacts and things like that. This makes me think of like Kark Clan Ironwork combos. Are you getting a Mirror Retriever and getting back 2 cards? Are you sacrificing things to make mana and doubling that mana? Are you, doing all of those things? And I'm aware of things like KCI don't actually get double from Gandalf's ability, but like, are you ETBing with certain artifacts that are like drawing you a bunch of cards and then sacrificing them? And now suddenly all of these synergies, like these Teshar-ish loops that you can know, you're also doing those things at flash speed. So you can then suddenly set these things up to be like, okay, well, actually in response, I'm going to flash in this KCI, sack my Mirror Retriever, get back 2 artifacts, and create a loop going. That's really interesting to me. I feel like there is a lot you can do with Gandalf, and once again, the ability to not only sort of flash in your pieces and combo off when your opponents aren't doing anything, but also just, once again, having a Panharmonicon on your commander and a Death Panharmonicon on the back end of it too. There's a lot of really cool stuff that Gandalf can do, so I'm really excited to see what people do with this deck. I think it's definitely got a lot of potential, and is going to bring a really unique option to mono white. I think this deck is going to be a lot of the things that people thought Elesh Norn was going to be when that first came out, the 5-mana Elesh Norn. So I'm really excited to see Gandalf see play, and I think it probably has potential to be the best mono white deck for cEDH, period. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I think that it can do some really crazy stuff. Just for example, some synergies being like the Heliod Ballista combo can be flashed in response to somebody. Stuff like that. Like, it's not the cheapest combo to flash in the entire world, but that is just one example of the potential for this deck. So I think this commander does a lot of stuff, and I'm very interested to see what it can do. The Mines of Moria. Mines of Moria enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. It taps for a red, and for 3 in a red, and to tap it, you can exile 3 cards from your graveyard to make 2 treasure tokens. Now, for me, this strikes me as a Magda card. It's like, I don't want to say it's free, because there are going to be times when it does come in tapped, but there are times in Magda where, you know, you've had a bunch of your dwarves blown up, you don't really have anything going for you, and the ability to just, like, play this land, make some treasures, and then pop off with your commander in a situation in which your opponents think they know how many treasures you have the potential of making that turn, makes it impressive enough to me that I think it might be worth an include. The fact that we have just this mono red commander that is already kind of land light in general, I think it, you know, it would be hard to convince me that this would hurt the deck more than it would help it. I think there's just going to be a lot of scenarios in which, you know, they've been hitting your Magda pretty hard, you finally get to play again, and then next turn they're like, well, you can't attack with that many dwarves, and you go, okay, play the Mines of Moria, activate the ability. That to me is enough like added grind potential that I think it's probably going to see play in Magda. That's about the only place I can really see it being played, but I'd love to hear if there's other places people are thinking of. Pippin, Guard of the Citadel, is a Vigilance Ward 1 2/2. You can tap, and another target creature you control gains protection from the card type of your choice until the end of turn. So this is sort of like a 2-mana legendary Mother of Runes-ish. It gives it protection from a card type, which is pretty interesting. So instead of protection from a color, it gives protection from a card type. So there's scenarios in which, like, protecting from instants means that you'll lose to a sorcery or you'll lose to a creature of that color. But then there's also scenarios in which the opposite can happen, which is like you protect from an abrupt decay, but they still can't chain of vapor it later in the turn. So that's kind of interesting. And the fact that it's legendary 2/2 means that I really think this is a really interesting card for a deck like Captain Sisay, or Sisay Weatherlight Captain, which is a deck I've been playing a decent amount lately, and I think, you know, having another Mother of Runes that's legendary that is sort of doing the game plan you wanted to anyways, and also, you know, adding pips to Sisay is really, really interesting. And I think there are other decks that are going to want it just because you want, you know, these sort of mid-rangey bear type effects that are also Mother of Runes, and they're really, really important, especially in the stacks decks of the formats or the creature decks of the format. You know, being able to either A, protect your creature combos, or B, protect your stacks pieces so that they can't be removed. So I think it'll definitely see play, and at least in Sisay. I feel like in Sisay it's sort of like a snap inclusion, and anywhere else it can be a little argued the other way. Minas Tirith is not one I want to talk about a huge amount, but it enters the battlefield tap unless you control a legendary creature. Might be familiar with the Mines. Adds a white, and for 1 in a white, draw a card. Activate only if you attack with 2 more creatures this turn. As we all know, white has trouble with card advantage. This seems like in a white deck you could get some card advantage just by having this land, and I find a lot of the time in like white stacks decks you have creatures lying around to go to combat, and you know it takes the place, and I don't think it replaces certain cards, but it's just another War Room style effect, and like a card like War Room I find super helpful in mono white. So Minas Tirith seems like a pretty easy include there. Now this one's really interesting. Orcish Bowmasters is a flash 1/1 for 1 in a black. And when it enters the battlefield, and whenever an opponent draws a card, except for the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, so the Notion Thief text, it deals 1 damage to any target, and then you amass 1 orc. And amass is kind of similar the way that it was in War of the Spark, except for literally these are just orcs instead of zombies. So, for example, if you're amassing for the first time, you don't have an army token, you would just make an army token of orcs, and it would be a 1/1, and you put a 1/1 counter on it. But if you already have the zombie out, it just becomes bigger, right? So the first time you amass, it's like, oh, I make this 1/1, and then the second time you amass, the 1/1 becomes a 2/2, right? The important part about this card is I feel like this actually gives another reason for Opus Thief to come back. Between the printing of Shieldred, I feel like a lot of people, when they saw Hull Breacher was banned, just kind of said Opus Thief is like dead, and then people stopped playing it, even though it's like super similar to Blue Farm, which is a deck that people consider one of the best decks in the format. I think people just go, well, why am I playing Opus Thief for Blue Farm? And a card like this one starts to actually answer that question. I think like the fact that it says 1 damage to any target makes this card infinitely more playable than if it didn't say that. Like if this card was just like deals 1 damage to an opponent, it would be decent, but it would not be good. I think the fact that, you know, anytime your opponents are drawing a card outside of their draw step, you're just starting to snipe down cards in your opponent's field. Like, that's crazy. The fact that you can like Wheel Fortune into this card, and then suddenly you have a 21 power creature and you have 21 damage in singleton shots that you can apply to anything on the board. You can, go 21 to the face, or you can go like, I'm going to deal 3 damage to that creature, 4 damage to that creature, 7 damage to that creature, then the rest goes to your face. And stuff like that is really, really interesting. Now, there's a lot of talk about like, okay, what colors do you even go into if you're doing the Opus Thief thing? Obviously, like Tim Necrom was the original version, but now we have a lot of, payoffs that are just in the Grixis shell. So does it even need to have white? Like Smothering Tithe is obviously good, but does it need to have white? I think there's a lot of really interesting talk around that archetype now, and this card genuinely is really, really interesting for that archetype, and I think it completely changes the game when it comes to wheel strategies in cEDH. I think it has a lot of potential. I mean, a card like Burning Inquiry is, 1 red mana, make a 9/9, deal 9 damage to whatever you want on the board. Like, it's crazy. And it's a flash threat, right? So if your opponents go to wheel, you can still flash this in response to something. Just like an Ocean Thief. Like, but it's so cheap. It is so crazy cheap. You can flash this in response to a Brainstorm. For 2 mana, make a 3/3 and deal 3 damage however you want on the board. Like, what? I really think this card is kind of cracked. I think it's really, really good, and I think it's going to be seeing play in places where you don't know that it would like traditionally do. And also, not even to mention the fact that it disrupts a ton of loops, right? So say you're doing like, infinite mana Thrasio stuff. Your opponents have a literal clock that just says like, okay, you have draws equal to your life step. Hope you can kill this card in the meantime. It stops like Gitrog combos because you can just like shoot the Gitrog after a certain amount of point. It stops Niv Mizzet for the same. Well, it doesn't really stop Niv Mizzet because they can just shoot the Bowmasters. But there's stuff like that where you're stopping certain combos from popping off because you go, okay, if you draw these cards, you're dead before you can even actually execute your combo. So yeah, I have nothing but good stuff to say about this card, and by far, I think this is the strongest card from the set spoiled so far. This card's cracked. I think this card is like actually cracked, and I'm really excited to pick up several copies of this card. It's kind of insane. So yeah, this card I think is going to be an actual player in the cEDH format for years to come. We have Aragorn the Uniter. So Aragorn is Sans Black, so 1 red, 1 green, 1 white, 1 blue for a 5/5 legendary human. Whenever you cast a white spell, you make a 1/1 white human. Whenever you cast a blue spell, you scry 2. Whenever you cast a red spell, it deals 3 damage to a target opponent. And whenever you cast a green spell, target creature gets +4/+4 in a turn. So you can see there's a lot of like toolboxy aspects of this card. One of the things to like actually mention with it is that it is technically an outlet for 2 different combos. So if you're doing Dockside combos in which you have to cast your Dockside, so Temur Sabertooth, Baron, Cloudstone Curia, all of those, not Emil, because you don't actually cast Dockside over and over again. But any of the other versions of those combos where you're actually recasting Dockside, every time you cast Dockside, it being a red spell, you go, okay, I'm casting a red spell, Aragorn triggers, deal 3 to an opponent. And then that's obviously you continue doing that loop until your opponents are dead. The same thing happens with Food Chain and Squee the Immortal, because with Squee being the creature you are casting over and over again out of exile, you are then casting a red spell over and over again, and Aragorn says, okay, every time you cast Squee with Food Chain, boom, 3 damage to your opponents. I don't think this card is good enough to see play. I think if someone played this, it would be a cEDH deck, right? Like, it is a Food Chain outlet and a Dockside outlet in the command zone. You could make this a cEDH deck. I don't know why you would play this over other options. Like 4-color Omnath seems to do what this deck does, just better, except for the fact that like if you exile a bunch of your library for Food Chain reasons, I don't know how you would do that in Sans Black, but this is just your outlet as opposed to Omnath, which has to draw your outlets. Even then, that seems like not the best reasoning. And then obviously the other comparison is like, the fact that you lose a meal as your Dockside combo that Omnath can take advantage of and Thrasios can take advantage of in that sense. So it is not the best Sans Black option that exists. However, if you go, hey, I want to play Aragorn in cEDH, you can do that. And it does like some cute stuff that, probably allows you to like grind out a mid-rangey game. But yeah, it's rather lackluster in my opinion in general. Here we have Samwise Gamgee, which is a Selesnya 2/2 whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a food token. Then you can sack 3 foods, return target historic card from your graveyard to your hand, and reminder, historic cards are artifact, legendaries, and sagas. So every 3 creatures basically gets you a historic regrowth, which is kind of cool. But the reason I'm really talking about Sam is because it makes the most efficient Abzan Protean Hulk pile to date, I think. So if you have a sacrifice outlet, Samwise, and Cauldron Familiar, Scourge of Standard and Pioneer and Historic on Arena, what happens is you get Sam, it sees the Cauldron Familiar enter the battlefield, which makes a food. You then sacrifice the Cauldron Familiar, and also the Familiar enters the battlefield, deals damage to your opponent. You sacrifice the Familiar, but because Sam made you a food, you can bring the Familiar back onto the battlefield by sacrificing the food, bringing the Familiar back. It pings your opponents. Sam sees the cat come in, makes you another food, etc., etc. This is a 2-card loop. Historically, we've had either like Safi Karmic Guide loops with a thing that allows you to ping every time something comes in, or people have used the classic Malira, Disciple of the Vault, and Lesser Mastercore loop, which, if you notice, a lot of those loops that I just mentioned have many more pieces than just Sam, Sack Outlet, and the cat. This is the cleanest Protean Hulk loop, on top of the fact that even if you just went for those 3, you still have 1 extra card for your Protean, or 1 extra mana creature specifically for your Protean pile. So you could just be like Sylvan Safekeeper, all of those cards, boom, that's a protected pile. Seems really, really solid. So I think this is one of the most efficient things to ever happen to a Protean Hulk dex. I think it's a super, super clean win condition, and I'm very, very excited to see if Protean Hulk strategies move over to this combo. I really don't see the reasons not to go over to this combo, because it's just genuinely so clean and efficient, and I'm really, really stoked to see that this is happening. I think it's really, really cool. I'm very excited to see it see play, and we'll see what happens with Protean Hulk strategies going forward, but it's, in my opinion, pretty exciting stuff. I think the, cat loops are going to create some more efficient Protean Hulk piles. I think there's also some stuff you can do with the card that's the Selesnya, the Revolt creature that brings back a thing 2 or less. And I think there's also some loops you can do that are really efficient that allow you to pull one of these pieces out of your graveyard if for some reason they go away, and allow you to execute the loops without one of your pieces. Renegade Rallier is the card I'm thinking of. So yeah, Samwise Gamgee is the Protean Hulk fixer, apparently, which is not a statement I thought I'd be saying, but hey, this is magic nowadays, right? But yeah, Samwise gonna help Abzan style Protean Hulk decks and make them apparently more clean and efficient. Boromir, Warden of the Tower. So this is a white human. So, Winota potential. It has vigilance, and whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. So, it counters your Force of Wills, your Fierce Guardianships, your Deflecting Spots, your Mana Crypts, your Lotus Petals, all that stuff that you cast for free, boom, gone, countered. It's a Lavinia style effect in mono white. And you can also sacrifice Boromir to give your creatures indestructible until the end of turn, and the ring tempts you. So just some free value on top of that. This card is pretty dope. I think it's definitely going to at least be tested in Winota. I don't know that it does enough to permanently earn the include. You also kind of run into the problem that happens with Lavinia, where it's like, oh, sometimes you shut off the free spell that actually was going to save you from losing the game. But in general, it's still pretty good. It also disrupts Brain Freeze, Underworld Breach combos, because you can't cast the Lion's Eye Diamond because Boromir will just counter it, which is pretty cool. So they'll never get their mana to be able to execute that loop. It's interesting. I don't think it's the most effective stacks piece ever printed, but it's not often that they print stacks bears, and it's pretty cool that we got another one. So Boromir, welcome to the party. This card is scary. Is a scary card that exists. A 1/2 Halfling Citizen, Delighted Halfling. You can tap it to add a colorless mana, or you can add 1 mana of any color. Spend this only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. So, some crazy stuff comes from this card that's uncounterable. In 60 card formats, it's just the uncounterable 3 mana Teferi, which is like gross, cracked. Najeela decks, this is terrifying in my opinion, to be able to turn 1 Halfling, turn 2 uncounterable Najeela, turn 3 uncounterable Derevi. Seems good to me. There's a lot of decks that are gonna like this card. I don't think every deck is going to love this card, but any deck that really wants to resolve its commander or really wants to resolve certain legendary spells that are combo pieces, once again, like Derevi and Najeela, this gets really scary really fast. And then the rest of the time, it just taps for colorless mana, which isn't the best thing in the entire world, but that's okay. I think there's a lot of potential with this card, and I think it's going to be a pretty expensive card coming out of this set because 60 card players are going to want it. 100 card players are going to want it. It's going to be popular. So pick up all your halflings while you can. I think this is a card. It's going to see a lot of play. And I think it's going to be one of those cards that is just kind of good. And the times in which it's better than just kind of good are going to be insane. So halfling, big fan. Check it out. Sauron the Lidless Eye. So this one's just... it's a cool Sauron, right? I included it in this list because it is another red-black World Gorger outlet / Dockside outlet commander. It's another one of those, like, is it the best Rakdos option that exists? Probably not. Like, playing a Armix Jeska or, like a Kroxa or other Rakdos lists that exist may be better, but it's pretty cool. The fact that it's a legendary threaten effect, so you can do stuff like taking one of your opponent's creatures that is stopping you from winning the game and sacrificing it and stuff like that. It's kind of cool. And then it has this activated ability that is just an infinite mana outlet because it pumps all your creatures, but also each opponent loses 2 life. So if you make infinite treasures with Dockside, or if you execute the World Gorger combo, you can play your Sauron and then just go, okay, I'm going to activate its ability a million times. You guys lose all of your life. GG's, game over. Boop, boop, boop. So it's kind of cool. There's a Rakdos Sauron in the command zone that is, just a Rakdos infinite mana outlet. And also, like, kind of cool that you can threaten, take your opponent's scary creatures for the turn, and also in a stalled out game, if you've got a bunch of value creatures lying around, just be like, okay, I'm going to pump 6 mana. Everything gets +4/+0. You guys all lose 4 life and chunk in with my creatures, including Sauron. So, yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's cool. It has potential. And it would be like if you're interested in playing Sauron and cEDH, boom, done. There it is. This one's actually surprisingly cool. So Mount Doom is a legendary red-black land. You pay 1 life to add red or black. 1 black red. Mount Doom deals 1 damage to each opponent. That's the important part of this card. And you can sacrifice it for 5 red black. Sacrifice Mount Doom and a legendary artifact. Choose up to 2 creatures, then destroy the rest. Activate only as a sorcery. So the ending part, if you can use that in a game, awesome. All the power to you. Kind of probably going to win you a grindy game, I'd assume. Saving 2 of your creatures and then saying, like, all the rest go away. The fact that it's a legendary land that taps for red and black and doesn't come in tapped, it just costs you a little bit of life. Super cool. I like that a lot. There's no downside. It's never going to come in tapped. There's no downside, but like there's no downside as far as coming in tapped. But it's an infinite outlet for certain archetypes. So any of the World Gorger decks that we talked about a second ago, so decks like Evelyn, stuff like that, because every time you're flickering your World Gorger, your lands come back in untapped, so you can just start boom, poke you with Mount Doom for 1, poke you with Mount Doom for 1, poke you with Mount Doom for 1. It's also a fetchable outlet in cEDH, which is really cool because there's been some less favorable outlets in the deck historically. And with Mount Doom, you can just have your infinite Derevi thing going on, where Derevi just untaps stuff infinitely, and you can go, I'm going to activate Mount Doom, flicker Derevi, untap Mount Doom, do that over and over again, and it's just an outlet for that in the command zone that can be fetched by cEDH, which is really, really cool. So I know I'm obviously cEDH's on the mind, but this was also one of the reasons I started looking at cEDH in the first place, because I knew this card was being printed, which in my opinion ups the card quality of the deck in general. So Mount Doom, pretty cool. It's a land that taps for 2 colors, that comes in untapped, and has a lot of upside. So Mount Doom is looking pretty hot. Big fan. Also, like, sacrificing a legendary artifact is not that big of a cost if you're getting a grind out game. Like if you're playing like a Rog Tavesh deck, you have this card in here for value, and then you're like, oh, hey, look, I got this Mox Opal. That's a legendary artifact. I got a Jeweled Lotus. Is Jeweled Lotus? No, Jeweled Lotus is not legendary. There's other ones, is the point. Mox Opal is the first one that came to mind. Mox Amber maybe too, I think. Yeah. So there's definitely options. and very easy options to make this card do a lot of stuff for a land. Like, it's a really solid land. Speaking of Protean Hulk stuff, that's why we're talking about this Golem, 1 in a black for a 3/1. If it leaves the battlefield, the ring tempts you, and you can pay a black, sacrifice a creature, return it from your graveyard to your hand, activate only as a sorcery. This is where this card gets interesting, because this is a sacrifice outlet that you can entomb. So a lot of the times people were playing like really weird cards to like Buried Alive pile, make your Protean Hulk happen. And the fact that this can go in your graveyard if you have a bunch of entomb effects and be a sacrifice outlet for only 1 black that can't be countered, because it's sacrificing as part of the cost from your graveyard, seems really good for those strategies. So there's a lot of, and for those who don't play a lot of Protean Hulk strategies, this might not seem like a big thing, but this is the most efficient from the graveyard sack outlet that has ever come out. So, I mean, apart from like Cabal Therapy, which is a card that like people have played in Protean Hulk strategies historically. So this is a creature that you can entomb, which is a big deal. And you can put it in the graveyard with Survival of the Fittest, which is also a big deal. And just like little things like that mean that this card is gonna live in more graveyards than you might expect it. I know this card was hyped a lot when the set was first spoiled. It's reprieve, or reprieve, however you want to say it. Return target spell to its owner's hand, draw a card. It's a remand in white, which doesn't exist until now, really. It's really cool. Basically, time walking your opponents by saying, put your crazy spell back in your hand, I'm going to draw a card. This replaces itself. Now, to be clear, for those who don't understand the nuances of the text, when something says target spell, it means it has to be something on the stack. So, for example, my opponent goes to cast an Ad Nauseam. They only have their 5 mana up. I go, okay, yeah, sure, for 1 white reprieve, put it back in your hand. I'm going to draw a card. Hey, guys, they're going to resolve an Ad Nauseam next turn. Cool. It's very good. Obviously, white being a rule of law color too, it's very nice to be able to out-tempo your opponents like that, and the fact that it cantrips is really cool too. So reprieve, probably just a solid card for these colors. And Gandalf the White, I know, has been talked about a little bit. The main reason to talk about this card is well, let's just read it. It's 3, and is it for a 3/4. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you can choose one that hasn't been chosen. Not this turn. Choose one that hasn't been chosen, period. You may tap or untap target permanent. It deals 3 to each opponent. Copy an instant or sorcery you control. You may choose no targets for the copy, and put Gandalf on top of its owner's library. So the card is an outlet with Lore Drakus and Dockside combos, in the sense that combo allows you to recur an instant sorcery over and over again, and then each time you would have a new Gandalf and you'd replay it, and then it would deal 3 to each opponent. That part's kind of cute. There's also stuff you can do with, like, Displacer Kitten makes this card a lot better, because you're casting instants, refreshing it, and then you get whatever mode you want with it. It's really cool to be able to, like, cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it, flicker with Kitten, and then, like, suddenly all of your instant sorceries are just being copied with your commander right away. And there's little cute stuff you can do like that, and then obviously it becomes an outlet if you want to deal damage to your opponents that way by storming off. It's not amazing, but it's at least worth mentioning in this video, so I figured we'd talk about that at the very least. And that's it for Lord of the Rings spoilers so far. I think the set is really cool so far. It's got a lot of unique cards. It's got some cards that I didn't expect to be printed, period, that I never thought would really be huge movers and muse shakers. But, you know, especially with that Orc Archer card, I think this set's got a lot of really cool stuff to it. What cards have I missed so far? What cards do you think are like, oh my god, how'd you miss this classic cEDH staple? Fill in the blank here. Let me know down in the comments below. And as I mentioned, when the more of the set comes out, I'll be letting you all know. A lot of big stuff coming up in the next few weeks. It is my moving weekend this weekend, so things are kind of crazy for me. I may or may not have a video next week just because things are absolutely insane on my plate right now. But I wanted to talk about some of these really sweet cards from the new set because they're really, really awesome. A reminder, as always, we're affiliated with Dragonshield. Dragonshield's awesome. And they're the sleeves that I use for all of my Dragonshield products. I get the black mats for literally all of my cEDH cards, and you know, I have to trust it pretty much because the cEDH cards are not cheap, and it's really not the cheapest hobby, so keeping your cards safe is super important. In addition, I'm affiliated with Monarch Media. I'm a community ambassador for them, and we have some exciting stuff coming up. I have been talking for weeks about not being able to announce an event, but here we are talking about Lotuscon this October in Illinois. Lotuscon was already a huge event before Monarch stepped in. Now Lotuscon has an insanely lucrative cEDH tournament going on that has some crazy prizes, like first place getting a time twister, getting serious cash prizes for the rest of the top 4. I can find the breakdown because I posted it on my Twitter a few weeks ago, but this is awesome. So this is going to turn into Mythic Lotus Gaming is the company that put on Lotuscon initially, and then they partner with Monarch to make this huge celebration of Magic that's going to be happening in Illinois in this October. I will 100% be there. I'm 100% going to be trying to win a time twister because that has been my cEDH holy grail mission for so long, and I've wanted to own one, and I don't have one, and I know so many people are like me out there because it's a card that's just gotten more and more ridiculously expensive as time goes on, and it's out there, and we can all go and vie for that competition. I'm so excited to be able to finally announce this Monarch event because I've been working with them for months now and trying to promote their stuff, and this event is going to be awesome. They were the first name in cEDH events that really came out and said, hey, we're going to put on real events with real money, and now other places are starting to notice, and the community is growing, and it's growing even better, and I can't be excited about an event more. And I also helped with conversations about the prizing for this event because I know what it's like to be a cEDH grinder, and I know what kind of prizes I'm looking for in these events. So I had many conversations with the people over at Monarch trying to get the best prizes for those of us who will be in the trenches competing for this tournament. It's got some amazing prizing. It's got amazing stuff on the way, and Monarch has really tried to be the community focused people for cEDH, and I'm really excited that this event is happening, that they're back on their feet after their hiatus, and I can't say enough good things. I'm super excited for this event. Check it out. I will leave the information for Monarch down in the description below, as I do in every one of my videos. So any information you are curious about for this event, for Monarch in general, go check it out. More details are going to be coming as time goes on, but I know there's a ton of special guests, probably myself included, as well as so many amazing things, and one hell of a prize pool. As I said, if you are a cEDH competitor, this should be an event that you prioritize. I think it's going to be awesome. Without any further ado, thank you all so much for watching this video. I can't thank you enough, and as I mentioned, so many cool things on the way in the next month. A big time of change for me, but it also means that I'm going to have a lot of time after I move, so starting towards the end of June, to really focus on this channel and to be able to put out more and more content. And while I'm doing that, y'all, just remember the push for me to do all this stuff is possible because of the people who help out over at patreon.com/comedianmtg. Without them, I wouldn't even really be able to take off this time to be able to work on the channel. And if more content comes out and y'all want to keep seeing it happen, that's the place where you can guarantee that it happens. I have a lot of really ambitious projects that I really want to do for this channel, and I really want it to be my main focus moving forward, and I can't do that without your support. So my hat's tipped to y'all. Let me know. Check out patreon.com/comedianmtg, as I said. Thank you all so much, and thank you so much for the people who've been supporting the channel already. I can't thank you enough. I never thought the channel would get to this point, and I'm so happy being here. So thank you all so much, and without any further ado, catch y'all next time. Peace.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then I'm gonna feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing.